Boa tarde a todos. Bem-vindos a mais um webinar da AICEP. Desta feita vamos falar de um mercado particularmente interessante, que é o Canadá. E dentro deste quadro, que é o quadro global do Covid-19 e de todos os desafios que o Covid-19 coloca às empresas, este webinar é particularmente interessante, mais uma vez, porque aborda aquele que é um mercado muito, muito importante, por variedíssimos motivos, em particular porque é um mercado que está na América do Norte, é um mercado de dimensão, é um mercado rico, é um mercado que tem um acordo com a União Europeia, o que é particularmente interessante também, e, portanto, é um mercado que tem todo o interesse para as empresas portuguesas. Hoje vamos nos dedicar mais e focar mais exclusivamente na questão do retalho, do retail, e como é que todo este quadro do retail está a ser mudado pela pandemia, mas também vamos ter uma visão mais global do mercado dada pelo nosso delegado em Toronto, que é o Raul Travado, que está aqui, já o podem ver na imagem. O convidado digamos assim, de fundo deste webinar é o Craig Peterson, que é um especialista na área do retail e que nos vai, de facto, focar e abordar mais intensamente o tema do retalho no Canadá. Relativamente a este tipo de webinars, eu queria também chamar a vossa atenção para o facto de a AICEP vai continuar, ou ir continuar, a organizar este tipo de webinars. Vamos continuar e, sobretudo, tendo em conta o quadro que estamos a viver todos, vamos continuar nas próximas semanas, portanto, estejam atentos àquilo que também vão ser das comunicações dos vossos gestores de cliente, no nosso site, naquilo que são as redes sociais, para que possam aproveitar o facto de nós termos uma rede espalhada pelo mundo, especialistas espalhados pelo mundo e que vos podem dar o máximo de informação e o máximo de pistas para que possam ser bem-sucedidos nos mais variados mercados. Só também para a vossa informação, nas próximas semanas, e já temos programados vários webinars, um deles, começamos pela Roménia, no próximo dia 26, na Alemanha, para o setor dos vinhos, no próximo dia 1, para os Estados Unidos, no próximo dia 15, na área dedicada à área alimentar, e França, no próximo dia 22, dedicado a uma área muito particular, que é o ecossistema de startups. Estamos ainda a desenvolver uma área de negócio que eu acho que é muito interessante nesta altura e que provavelmente é complementar à questão do retalho, que é todo o e-commerce e tudo o que está vinculado ao e-commerce. E, portanto, contamos ter proximamente novidades em relação a marketplaces na China e marketplaces também nos Estados Unidos. Aliás, na próxima quinta-feira vamos ter uma edição particularmente interessante dedicada ao marketplace Etsy, que é americano. Vou passar então à sessão e queria também vos chamar a atenção para um pequeno pormenor que tem mais a ver com a logística, que é os vossos microfones vão ser desligados, as vossas câmaras vão ser desligadas, mas todas as questões que tiverem ao longo do webinar podem ser colocadas através do chat. Portanto, não hesitem, podem colocar a qualquer momento. Nós, no fim, vamos responder às perguntas. Vamos tentar, com o nosso convidado e também com o nosso delegado, responder ao máximo de perguntas possível. Todas aquelas que não forem possíveis de ser respondidas, nós tentaremos, ao máximo, que sejam respondidas a posteriori. Portanto, eu, sem mais delongas, eu vou passar a palavra ao Raul Travado, que é o nosso delegado em Toronto. Muito obrigado. Até já.
Ora, muito obrigado, Eduardo. Muito bom dia a todos. Eu sei que temos casa cheia. Queria agradecer a todos o interesse no mercado do Canadá, que, como o Eduardo disse, é um mercado de grande interesse para as nossas empresas. Eu vou apenas tentar transmitir um breve retrato da situação atual aqui no Canadá, resultante da crise do Covid, e mencionando 5 pontos. I'm going to switch to English now, given that our guest specialist does not speak Portuguese, so I will just briefly go over some numbers of the COVID-19.
Desculpa, Raul, só uma pequena nota, é só para a nossa audiência, que se tiverem questões em inglês, podem colocar em inglês, mas também podem colocar questões em português. Nós depois traduziremos. Muito obrigado, desculpem só. Desculpa só, Raul,
Thank you. So I was just as I'm going to proceed. So I will just provide with some numbers of the present situation of the COVID-19 pandemic and its geographic distribution here in Canada, the main the economic impact, the main government measures implemented to support the economy, the impact on our bilateral trade, and what we can see in the months ahead of us. So, starting with the pandemic and the numbers of the pandemic, and these numbers are the official government numbers, of course, from last Friday. So today they are slightly different, but as we can see, in Canada there were more than 100,000 positive cases. So, but the focus of the problem was indeed two main areas, Quebec and Ontario. And this is natural given that these two provinces are the ones with the most population in Canada, together account for more than 60% of the total population. So 54,000 cases in Quebec, 33,000 in Ontario, and mainly in the big metropolitan areas of Montreal and Toronto. But also out west, BC and Alberta, there were a significant number of cases. So 87% of the infections were registered in Quebec and Ontario. Moving along, the deaths, unfortunately, Canada accounts for more than 8,000 deaths. This number went slightly up, but again, Quebec and Ontario are the center of the problem. Below 200 in BC, in Alberta, 152 cases, and again, this was last Friday. But if there was any changes, were very marginal these last few days. Again, 95% of the mortality attributed to COVID happened in Quebec and Ontario. A few numbers just here. What I think it's relevant is just, last Friday, more than 29,000, there were still more than 29,000 active cases, and almost 2,000 were considered critical, which is still a major concern, as we can appreciate. In terms of the main economic impact, of course, the Canadian economy suffered a major blow with this crisis, as pretty much any other part of the world, and the decline happened across all sectors of the economy. Of course, some were hit harder than others, and the worst happened, of course, on the services side of the industry, where massive layoffs happened. Most industries shut down, whether accommodation, food services, restaurants, transportation and warehousing, of course, arts, entertainment, sports, everything shut down. The school system shut down. The latest numbers for the GDP report to March, and so we can see there was a decline of almost 6% when compared to March last year. The same, of course, a significant blow in terms of international trade. Exports went down over 35%. Imports, the same, over 30% down. And retail sales, unfortunately, also a significant drop, more than 30%. The same applies to manufacturer sales. And again, this compares the numbers from April and March when referring to the GDP to the same month last year. In May and these are the latest numbers for the unemployment. Unemployment rate in Canada was almost 14%, which is, I think, the second highest on record. With the the layoffs that pretty much penetrated all industries in Canada, more than 3 million people were out of job in between late February and May, and by mid-May, indeed, there were more 3 million people out of job, mostly, of course, under layoff. And what did the Canadian government do? This it's basically an outline of events for the past 3-4 months, but the Canadian government responded with a very, very robust economic plan. So we saw in mid-March the economy shutting down. As I said, only essential services remained open. The borders closed to all non-Canadians and non-essential traffic. Most provinces declared state of emergency, and a mandatory quarantine was implemented. By the end of the month, the federal government approved a first initial aid package of $82 billion. Of course, in the following months, these other packages were made available to support the economy. In April, all these packages, these support programs were made available. During that month, there was a very, very significant international procurement effort from the federal and actually provincial governments in terms of the stocking personal protective equipment and medical supplies. Many Canadian manufacturers retooled their plants to produce critical equipments. We saw a very, very significant problem in the long-term care homes and old age homes, especially in Ontario, in Quebec, and the military forces were deployed to help. Around 1,700 military with medical training, of course. In Alberta, a very significant problem was outbreaks of COVID in the most important meat plants in Canada. These plants supply around 70% of the meat products in Canada. So this created shortages and, of course, significant price increases. In the months of May and June, provinces started reopening their reopening plans, lifting restrictions, and we saw shops starting to open, the construction restarting, and we started seeing ramping up of the economic activity in some sectors, but in a very gradual way, and at different paces in different regions of the country. In June, of course, this reopening moved forward. We see in some areas schools are open, more retail shops, hardware stores, restaurants as well. Here, mainly outdoor spaces, services. Several services are resuming activities, but everything's still under conditions of physical distancing and others to prevent the disease. Of course, some provinces are already moving into the phase 3 of the reopening process. Here in Ontario, we are still lagging behind. Some regions are already on phase 2, but the metro area will move into phase 2 tomorrow. But we are still under emergency measures until July 15, so another 3 weeks. And what did the government, the Canadian government, do to support the economy? Of course, with more than 3 people without a job, and there was a significant loss of income, so plans were put in place to support individuals and families with measures of income replacement, tax relief measures, support for students, for the older population, top-up income to companies. The measures were mainly directed to keeping employment, avoiding layoffs, to allow businesses to rehire workers. Several financial instruments were made available so companies can have loans to keep their businesses working, and of course several tax relief measures as well. And many sectors, very important sectors in the Canadian economy, were also given direct support, direct financial assistance, agriculture, fisheries, the very important sector of oil and gas, vital to the Canadian economy, the whole scientific community, and very significant investments were made in funding research on vaccines and therapies for the COVID-19. And finally, the government made available a very robust package of support to all those organizations that are indeed helping Canadians on the field, like the Red Cross, United Way, food banks, and others. Up to now, the estimation for all this investment is around $170 billion that the federal government has spent in the fight of COVID. But of course, the impact of this investment, it's much larger, let's say. Of course, the COVID crisis and the slowdown of the economic activity in the country had a significant impact on bilateral trade, and of course our exports to Canada were also impacted. We have a traditional positive trade balance with Canada. As we can see, our exports were trending up, and for many years till 2019. But with the COVID crisis, and at this point we have only available numbers for the first 4 months of the year, we can see a significant decline of 13.5% in our exports to Canada. Still, the balance is favorable to us, but many of our export sectors and the products that we traditionally export to Canada were impacted. And these are some examples. Of course, with most retail shutting down, apparel, footwear, furniture, and many other home textiles, many other products suffered very significant losses. Cork products, and here I would say this is more related with the slowdown of construction. We are talking about underlayment and isolation products, but so iron and steel, organic chemicals, machinery, everything went down. But some products, in spite of all this somber environment, some products do show some growth. Of course, pharmaceutical products, and that it's clear, it's evident why. Beverages, and here we are talking mainly about wines, and oddly enough, this crisis times we are living in were quite beneficial to the wine monopolies in this country. So sales are growing pretty much all over the country. People were enclosed at home for many long weeks, and it seems everyone started drinking more. Plastic products went up. Our twine and ropes, it's a product where we do have a very significant position here in the Canadian market. Same fabrics and technical instruments as well, over 30%. What can we expect in the months to come? Well, first of all, there's great uncertainty. No one really knows what is going to happen, and there's fear about second outbreaks. Everyone talks about the second wave, but I think the Canadian government here is trying to take a very prudent strategy, and is keeping a very strong message that the COVID is not over, and in spite of the economy reopen, we all have to be very careful and keep on maintaining physical distances and all the necessary precautions to avoid the spread of the disease. But provinces will move forward with the later stages of reopening. We will see more businesses, industrial activity regaining steam. Employment will recover. With that, of course, people will regain also income. Hopefully, we will see some rebound on consumer spending, which it's always good news. The government support programs will be in place still for months to come, it seems there's already some light at the end of the tunnel. Of course, basically the fundamentals of the Canadian economy are strong, so it's to be expected that the Canadian economy will rebound relatively fast, at least when compared with some other economies. But the Bank of Canada projects some growth already in the third quarter, and all the big Canadian banks, and there's basically 5 big banks in Canada, are projecting the GDP to grow already next year around the 4.5. There's estimations between 4 and 5% growth for the GDP. So for now, that's it. This is just an overall picture. I think today the most important thing is really to listen to our specialist guest speaker, Craig Peterson. He's the editor-in-chief and founder of the Retail Insider website. Actually, the Retail Insider is probably one of the most influential, if not the most influential, retail market intelligence website in Canada. Craig is a consultant and a market analyst with the Retail Council of Canada. He's also a director at the University of Alberta School of Retailing in Edmonton, and he holds a law degree and a commerce degree. And Craig is the president and CEO of the Retail Insider Media. So, Craig, I leave the floor to you, and I'm sure everyone is looking forward to your insights on the Canadian retail market and how things will reshape and still offer opportunities for Portuguese companies to grow and do business in this market. Craig?
Thank you so much for the introduction. I just had to unmute myself there. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I'm going to go through a bit of an overview of the Canadian economy, specifically tied to retail and wholesale, making it applicable to companies from Portugal that are looking at coming into Canada or are already operating or distributing here and are looking for a bit of information about what's predicted for the future. We've had, as we just discussed here, a bit of a, obviously, situation around the world with COVID-19. This has created some uncertainty for the world, but it's also created, I think, some opportunities for brands to reinvent themselves as well as to move into new markets. Right now, what we're seeing is a consumer that is becoming much more open-minded, I guess we would say. We've had, obviously, a major shakeup with a pandemic. We've had socioeconomic situations. One thing that we are seeing here in North America, including Canada, is a bit of a shift in the perception of, well, the public related to, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement. So with things like this is actually, I think, shifting the psyche of the consumer, which means that we have an opportunity to provide new ideas and new products and pretty much, anything that might grab the consumer with, say, ethical messaging or otherwise. So this is actually an exciting time, I think, in some respects in the world and with opportunities for businesses. So I'm going to go into a few things here. I've got some slides. So, and actually, we'll just bring the slide up here. So we've got the website, as was mentioned. I'm the editor-in-chief of an online publication, Retail Insider. What we do daily is we try to provide information on what's happening in the Canadian retail industry. It's quite dynamic, and especially in March, things did change. As mentioned, we saw stores close. Now we're starting to see stores opening again. There may still be some uncertainty there, obviously. So I will go to the first slide. As a little bit of a background, and even before I get into the history, I don't know if you can see me drawing on here. Canada is a large free market economy for the most part. We've got a population approaching 38 million people, so we are quite a large market. The Canadian market would be considered highly developed, quite highly sophisticated, and relatively affluent compared to most parts of the world. In many respects, what I found, the mentality of the Canadian consumer is somewhere as a hybrid between what we might see for, say, an American consumer, as well as a bit of a bent for that would be a bit European, which is interesting. Canada is very, very highly multicultural. I'm in the city of Toronto, which is the largest city in Canada. I'll do a little bit of a geographic overview of Canada and what the markets are like. Toronto, they say, is the world's most multicultural city. It's an absolutely wonderful place. We have many different neighborhoods, and some of them are very ethnic-based, which really creates a rich tapestry to the city. And other cities in Canada are certainly multicultural as well. Again, I will get into that, but Toronto is a very unique place in that respect because it has welcomed, in some cases, almost 100,000 new immigrants a year. So that does create a really unique experience. And it's a very good one. One of the interesting things about Canada is we're relatively harmonious in terms of cultures coming together, which isn't something that we've necessarily seen so much in other countries. So that, I think, is a real advantage because Canadians can be very, very open-minded. And I think that, again, does provide opportunities. So I will get into this here. We'll talk quickly about a bit of the background of retail in Canada. And I'll be very quick because we're not here to discuss history, but it just provides context. So Canada is a relatively new country. It was founded in 1867. It was still very, very small back then. Provinces continued to be added to Canada until 1949. So it wasn't even that long ago. That was Newfoundland that we added to Canada. So what we saw in the late 1800s, early 1900s were smaller stores. Well, what started as trading posts. I mean, the fur trade, trading furs was kind of almost how Canada got started in some respect for the current economy anyways. From there, fur trading became small stores. Then we saw a movement towards the larger department stores, which was something that we saw in downtown cores. Over the years, we saw after World War II a movement towards the automobile. People started moving into the suburbs. We saw shopping centers, which isn't something so common in Portugal, but there are a few in the suburbs. From there, the department stores moved into the suburbs. But then we saw different things happen in the economy. We saw large big box retailers coming in eventually. We saw Walmart come in, I think the biggest retailer in the world. We've seen very large grocery chains. We've seen discount retailers or retailers which offer things at a lower price than what you would traditionally charge at retail. So there's very much a diversity to retail in Canada as it's happened over the years as part of our history. And this is just an old photo of Jasper Avenue in Edmonton. The next slide here, it's what I've actually just gone over essentially. One thing I didn't touch on, which is obviously very, very big, is online shopping. Obviously, that's something we're seeing pretty much throughout the world at this point. If it hasn't been developed heavily, it will be. I think with COVID-19, we've certainly seen an acceleration of some of these trends, including people starting to go online a little bit more to shop. I know that I've done that. Here in North America, Amazon is an extremely powerful retailer. It's primarily online. It had been opening some physical retail spaces, not really yet in Canada, except for a couple of pop-up retail spaces. But many, many Canadians are Amazon Prime members, Amazon Prime being the free shipping if you pay a certain amount per year. I think it's still 79 Canadian dollars a year, which is considerably less than what Americans pay. So we're getting a good deal here. Many people are still buying on Amazon. There may be some opportunities there actually for Portuguese companies to get in front of Canadians even through Amazon. Some companies don't mind that. Some would prefer to do things otherwise. But if you are on Amazon, you're not getting that physical retail experience. You're not going to be in front of the consumer directly so that they can touch and feel something. Maybe right now that's not so bad, but the world will change. We will get back to a new normal. But as our stores open, people still want to go out. As I look out my window and see some people out there. So until the storm comes. So as part of this history, like I mentioned, we had some really interesting retailers enter the country. Some of you on this call here probably distribute to some of these retailers. So we had Nordstrom come, well, we had Target come in 2013. It left. It didn't work out so well, but they're not really taking imports anyways. Nordstrom came in. I know there's some Portuguese brands in there. Excellent retailer out of Seattle. In the photo here as well, we've got the Hudson Bay Company and Saks Fifth Avenue. They are under the same ownership. Again, a very large retailer, many different brands carried in both of those stores. Hudson's Bay would be a little bit more mid-market to upscale in terms of the price point and the positioning. Saks Fifth Avenue is positioned as being very, very high-end. We've also seen, interestingly enough, over the past several years, more than 200 international brands enter the Canadian market by actually opening their own physical stores. Here I've got a photo of a Bottega Veneta boutique. It's an Italian luxury brand, which many people will know. And that's just one of many, many, many examples of brands that have come into the country by opening their own stores. But I know in the case of some that are on the call, they're manufacturers and not necessarily retailers. So it's not going to be necessarily practical to open stores specifically, but there are the companies, again, like the Hudson Bay Company, Nordstrom, Simons, and a few others, which I'll talk about as well here. So where's my next slide? And actually, this is quite small. I'll just make my screen bigger here. So in terms of specifically speaking about different targets for Portuguese brands, Canada has, like I said, a very, very diverse range of retailers. We've got independent retailers that would be in streets and malls. Getting to them can be done through such things as trade shows. Now, again, with COVID-19, we'll see what the future of that is. It could be a little bit more online, but nevertheless, there are going to be connection points for these types of brands. Again, with the department stores, I talked about the Hudson Bay Company and Saks Fifth Avenue. I would say Holt Renfrew would probably be our best luxury multi-brand store. The business model is a little bit like El Corte Inglés, which is in Portugal. There are many concession boutiques within the department store, but they do retail as well. And in some cases, including in the case of Holt Renfrew, they actually do welcome, for example, different countries with products coming in to showcase them. It's called the H Project. If anybody has questions about that, I might be able to connect you with someone at Holt Renfrew, just because, well, their office is up the street from where my home office is, and they do look for it. They've had different presentations, such as Uncrate India was one of them. They had Uncrate Africa is what they called it. What they mean is a crate that they're opening and they're taking the product out. So they do welcome different products from different countries, and they celebrate that. So again, that's an opportunity. La Maison Simons is another retailer. I'll go into this a bit more here. We do have the big box retailers, Walmart, which is a very large retailer, Costco, again, a big retailer. Getting into some of those retailers could be a bit of a challenge, and also given the lower prices of those retailers, I think that certainly some Portuguese brands would look for something a little bit more high-end in terms of, I know that the quality of products in Portugal are excellent, and the price point, isn't the cheapest, which is okay. It just means that, you're not going to be going into a dollar store, and that's probably fine. That's not where you would want to be. Loblaw brands, interestingly enough, both of the photos I have here are Loblaw's. It's one of the biggest retailers in Canada. They do grocery. They've got a drugstore. Interestingly enough, the parent company owns the Holt Renfrew that I just talked about. They also own Selfridges in London, Brown Thomas in Dublin, De Bijenkorf in the Netherlands. We have other large grocery chains. We've got Sobeys and we've got Metro. We've got, of course, big international brands such as IKEA, which do furniture, but I don't think that they would really, be collaborative in that respect. But nevertheless, many of those international brands that you'll see in major cities around the world are in Canada. Not all of them, but certainly some of them are. Canadians really do like a sale and a bargain, so we do have certainly discounters and off-price retailers. And again, we've got standalone retail. I talked about online retail. Definitely, again, with COVID-19, we've seen many Canadians go online. We think that those habits will be permanent, but people will still want to go out and have a physical experience in terms of retail, so that's not going to change. But now what we're starting to see in terms of a trend, certainly with retailers that I've been speaking to, is amplifying their online presence, having very, very exceptional social media to get in front of people, say through Instagram, to talk about their brand. And in some cases, they may do a pop-up retail. What that means is for a temporary period of time, they may have some sort of a showcase. That could be a partnership with another company. I'm just thinking companies such as Brica. There's a few out there which I've reported on as a journalist. That's why I know the names. That we'll have these temporary pop-up installations, essentially. So that is certainly something that has been done in the past. And I'm going to go over, we had a few question and discussion points that we wanted to discuss quickly here. It says, how are things changing and what comes after the COVID-19 pandemic? Certainly a lot of things have changed. The consumer has been, scared or spooked a little bit in terms of going out in public. This has obviously happened around the world and not just in Canada. But as was discussed earlier, Canada, has had quite a few COVID-19 cases. I just checked the statistics. We've got over 100,000 confirmed cases. I'm sure it's much more, which just depends on the testing. But we've had over 8,000 deaths in the country. Not nearly as hard as hit as the United States or Brazil or Italy or Spain, but nevertheless, still a tragedy. But what that has done to the consumer mindset is the consumer now is a little bit more hesitant to go out. If we ever did acquire a vaccine for COVID-19, I'm sure that would change. But consumers now are becoming more brave. People are wearing face masks outside in some cases, and hopefully that will happen more so. We haven't had that here so much. But in terms of how things are changing, we will see, I think, fewer store locations for certain brands in Canada. I do think that some will close, but those stores that are open or even stores that relocate, I think will be better and more experiential. and more spacious in terms of they will not be as crowded. Another point I was asked to address is how manufacturers should adapt to the new trends in Canada. And that's a good question, because in some respects, we are still waiting to see how a few things are going to materialize or play out within the Canadian economy as well as with retail. Certainly, the world has not ended here. We have seen, say, when stores have opened, in some cases, very long lineups of people wanting to get into those stores. And we've seen that around the world, of course, but this has certainly happened in Canada. This is very, very encouraging. So with manufacturers, if they're looking at getting into retailers, I would say that, or just partnering, there are a few things that are very, very important. I think that especially at this time, having, for example, a connection to Canada, a lawyer, someone who is able to deal with contract work and whatnot, I think is going to be very, very important. And also other safety measures that are there in terms of ensuring that, say, you get paid for supplies and whatnot. What I think we're going to see with quite a few of these large retailers in Canada that sell products from other brands, say a department store or a multi-brand retailer, is some are going to struggle for a somewhat shorter period of time. And in some cases, it might be challenging for them, say, to pay bills. So I think certainly having legal recourse is going to be very, very important. I wouldn't want to deter people from investing in Canada. I would just say that right now it's going to be important to ensure that everything is pretty much perfect or is going to be done right, because this is, again, a bit of a challenging time. In some cases, to be honest, some retailers in Canada will probably go bankrupt. But in many cases, these retailers will actually come back and will be stronger and will be able to continue to operate. So I don't think it's all bad news. In some cases in Canada, this was already happening. I would blame landlords to a degree, and the very, very high rents that were being charged for some retailers that have physical locations. We're starting to see that being worked out. It was something that was already happening before COVID-19. So again, I wouldn't say that everything that we're seeing is a catastrophic and is directly related. We were already going through a shift here in Canada from what I could see. And we were seeing a shift like that really around the world. One of the interesting things, again, that I've noticed is very much a direct consumer trend. So brands that are able to stand on their own in terms of their name recognition, they've been able to come in and through, say, social media and through very strong websites where people can buy things, we call that e-commerce websites, they've been able to, say, go directly to the consumer. They may do a pop-up store, and some brands will actually do stores. We don't have that many Portuguese brands in Canada with stores. It's not as common, but certainly, Zara from Spain, for example, obviously we have Massimo Dutti, which is also one of their brands. We've got retailers from around the world here. But again, we still do have multi-brand retailers in Canada that I think present tremendous opportunities for Portuguese brands, be it in the food area, fashion, alcohol such as wine. It's as diverse, I think, as the manufacturing that we see in Portugal. In terms of future opportunities, again, the online world is going to be very, very important. The multi-brand retailers that we have are going to present, I think, some tremendous opportunities, again, across the sphere, from grocery to fashion to home furnishings, giftware, which is, I think, still going to be quite strong. And again, the department store in Canada, those that do continue to operate in the future, which probably should be all of them, I'm hoping, I think do present a tremendous opportunity, because they are looking to reinvent themselves and to be new and exciting and offer products to the consumer, which will be quite interesting. So I think that, to sum things up in terms of the opportunities that we have in Canada, I think that they are exciting. I would say definitely look to the Canadian market in terms of opportunities. I'm willing to connect with people because, like I said, in some cases, there are some uncertainties right now. It may be difficult to identify some of the opportunities, but those opportunities will come. So we are very much in a state of flux. But that state of flux, in my opinion, does create a level of excitement because we are at a time when I think that we are going to see, at least in Canada and the United States, the consumer mindset shifting. Another thing that's really interesting, I won't go on too much, but some brands actually do like to launch in North America through Canada. This is something that I've seen at the wholesale level as well as at the retail level. I think it was Lynx of London as an example. They're no longer around. They unfortunately had some financial issues, but I spoke to the CEO and they said that the Canadian market was a wonderful place to introduce a brand to North America. They expanded to the United States. The same thing with Straussen. It's a Swiss menswear brand. I think they're Swiss or are they out of Germany? Because they're both basically. But again, they chose Canada to open their first stores. Decathlon, the French sports retailer that's all over the world now, biggest sports retailer, chose Canada to start its expansion in North America. There are many others as well. So I'm just going to move ahead with my slides here. I've been talking without going through them. But I basically discussed this already. How are things changing? I should have gone with my slides. I was just talking. But what I'm going to do now, and should we stop for any questions or should I just keep going?
We have some questions if you want to have a break and answer some questions.
Yeah, let's do it. This is sort of a natural, this is kind of a natural gap in the conversation. Okay. I should try to center nice. Myself here in the camera.
So for a change, we'll have some questions for you. Yes. Well, we have some questions, more broadly speaking, I would say. In which regions or main urban areas is retail activity expected to rebound stronger? Do you have any data on this, or at least your opinion about this?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. Let me think about that. I would say the first places, and this is actually counterintuitive to a degree. I think that Quebec and Ontario, specifically Toronto and Montreal, just because of the inherent wealth that is within these regions. I'm thinking in the shorter term because we do have travel restrictions right now in Canada. We are not bringing in many tourists like we were before. We had parts of Canada where retail was very, very highly reliant on tourists. So Toronto and Montreal, I would say, certainly have a very wealthy local population. British Columbia, specifically the Vancouver market, certainly does as well. But it's also very, very highly reliant on tourism. Some retailers, especially those in the gift area, in terms of giftware, were reliant on cruise ships. We don't know what's going to happen with cruise ships in the future. I'm quite worried. There's a lot of negative press about cruise ships and COVID-19, right? So some of those companies might go bankrupt. I don't know. I haven't kept up. But nevertheless, this could be very negative to retail. Alberta will be a bit more challenging because of oil prices. So the province of Alberta, it's a beautiful province, has two large cities, Edmonton and Calgary. And I'll go through these a little more in detail because I actually have this as part of the presentation. But given the reduction in oil prices as well as other challenges in that economy, that is going to be a little bit harder to come back. But what's interesting as well is there are quite a few people with money there. The average incomes in Alberta are still the highest in Canada, I believe, as an average. So with that, I do think that we will see a retail recovery, but it's going to, I think, take a little bit more time. But the cost of living there is quite a bit less than some other parts of Canada. So people there do have more disposable income just because they're paying less money for their homes and their automobile insurance, actually, too. So, yeah, the Maritimes will be more.
Which segments do you see that will recover fastly?
What, sorry?
Which segments? What kind of products do you see? Well, housewares, furniture, fashion, I don't know. What kind of products do you have in mind for the recovery, or what you think that will go first in this path to recovery?
Well, right off the bat, food, food doesn't even need a recovery. People are still eating, right? So we didn't lose our grocery stores, our drug stores, dollar stores, which again aren't so relevant to this conversation. But with those types of brands, we had the stores open throughout. People are still eating. Again, I think with this societal shift that we're seeing to be a bit more open-minded, people are looking for new food options. And I know for myself, I'm looking for new things from, a curry to, basically the world of food. You're thinking, some new Chinese food, Portuguese tarts. I mean, that's something that, there are many Portuguese people living in a city like, say, Toronto. So we already have a lot of multicultural food here, but there's always room for more, especially if it's delicious. So, food has certainly, if there was any sort of a downfall, that would be the first to come up again. Home furnishings as well. I mean, we did see a bit of a downturn in terms of home furnishing sales in Canada during COVID-19. It wasn't that significant in some aspects. And in some cases, some people who, say, had some time off, they weren't able to go into the office, started renovating their homes. So I know that paint sales at some stores like Home Depot were very high to the point they actually had trouble keeping it in stock. So we have seen an increase in home furnishing sales. And when the wealth starts coming back in terms of people, say, having jobs, they'll have more money. I think that people will be using their homes more as their sanctuary, as a place to spend time, especially if people aren't going out as much. So I think that the home goods sector is going to have a tremendous rebound in Canada as people try to make their homes very much a place that they want to be in. So this is a great time for real estate developers. It's going to be a great time, I think, for anything in the home business, as you would say, essentially. So fashion is going to, I think, take a little bit more time. We will see a rebound. In terms of stores that sell fashion, the lineups that we have seen have been, to me, quite surprising and encouraging. I'm saying that in a good way. I think there is going to be a bit less of a demand in the short term for a lot of clothing, only because people won't be going out quite as much, say to, going to work or going to meet friends, going to a charity gala. Someone, say, that was wealthier, women that might go for lunch together and wear a fine, Valentino dress. There's going to be less of that in the short term. Also, we probably will see a little bit of an economic recession in Canada. It's supposed to be fairly short. This is what analysts are saying. Again, these are just predictions. We don't know what the future is going to be exactly, but with a short recession, usually men will stop shopping before women or will reduce their spending. So again, with menswear, there may be a little bit of a downturn in the short term, but I think this will all pick up eventually. Again, the world, isn't ending; it's just changing a little bit. So these opportunities are still going to be there.
Still opportunities all over the place.
Absolutely.
So just one more broader question, and then you go on with your presentation.
Right.
What do you think about this agreement with the European Union? Do you think that is in this context, there is some backlash against, for instance, Asian products in Canada? Or you don't feel this kind of behavior or this kind of...
That's a good question. I don't know if there's going to be a backlash. I mean, especially for products that are lower priced, if you look at what's in stores here, there are a lot of products from places like China, especially. There's just no question. What do they say? China is the world's factory. But that is for very much, inexpensive consumer goods. Obviously, Louis Vuitton is not making all of its products in China. They're being made, in Europe and the United States, apparently, and a few places. I think some bags are made in Portugal, actually. There's a factory there. But, the thing is, though, there may be a trade war. This is very much an uncertainty. This could actually be good for Portugal, though, in some respect. But again, with geopolitical situations that we're having here with China, there's some challenge relations. I don't maybe have to go into too much detail, but we arrested the CFO of Huawei. The United States kind of had us do it. We have international treaties. I think that the opportunities to trade with other places such as Europe would be tremendous, but this would be very much in a somewhat higher price point. I don't think European countries are going to be competing specifically on price, because that's going to be difficult to do when you have countries out there that have very, very low labor cost, for example, and may have lower environmental protection and employee protection, et cetera. So again, I think, well, if anything, if we see less trade with China, we would see increased trade with a place like, say, India or Pakistan at the lower price. But at, say, higher price points. I mean, Canada was kind of, was a British colony. The French came in. We have a European history to Canada, including, Portugal, and that goes around the world. That's just the history of the world. So having that affinity and that relationship, I think, will continue. And again, I think that those opportunities would be there as well. And there's probably going to, I think, be an amplified relationship with Europe, because I think Canada is looking for allies. Well, I shouldn't say all of North America. The United States is a different market. It has a very unique president. And he has a certain mandate that, we'll see what the future holds in that respect. But the United States is still, a pro-business country for the most part, too. So
this agreement with European Union definitely will increase this relationship with Europe.
I think so. Yeah, and I hope it does. I mean, I would like to see global trade with countries that work well, have a great relationship, and as Canadians, we're very, very collaborative. So I think that we'll just see better things coming. I don't see any negatives at this point with the European Union and Canada.
Perfect. So let's leave it for now and go ahead, please. We have a lot of questions, just to warn you that we have a lot of questions, specific questions, but I guess I will leave this for the end of the presentation. Okay?
Let's do that. I can get through this quite quickly. What I'll do is a bit of a geographical analysis, but I won't take too much time, because, we can answer some questions. In some cases, if I don't know the answers to questions, we can get back to people as well, because, again, there are going to be certain nuances. There'll be things that are very specific. Also, like I said, things may change. We still have to watch what's going to happen, I think, in the world over the next few weeks and months. Because I look at a big picture, and that big picture still has a lot of blank spots to it, because I do think that we are going to see a few aspects of our society here in Canada and North America change. And I think for the most part, it will be for the better. But there's still a lot of uncertainties. I mean, for example, we don't know if there's going to be a second wave of COVID-19 in the fall. That could have a tremendous impact on business, as well as obviously other aspects of Canadian society. It's kind of a wait and see type of situation. So we are at a bit of a crossroads, but nevertheless, things will go on. It's just a matter of how and when. So I think that a lot of people will be keeping in touch to try to figure out what's happening in this market moving forward. But the Canadian market, I think, is positioned for recovery much stronger than many other countries would be at this point. We are making major investments. Our government is on board to be pro-business for the most part. And that's all very encouraging information, I would say, overall, despite the challenges. So what I'll do now is do a quick little regional analysis to give people a context. If you haven't looked at a map of Canada, I'm sure many people are familiar because they're already doing business here. We're a really big country. I think in terms of land mass, we're the second largest in the world. In terms of our population, we're not that big. I mean, 38 million is not that big compared to some countries in Europe, but our land mass is bigger than all of Europe. So, it's quite big, but we're also a very urban country. So there's a lot of, emptier space in parts of Canada, especially in the north. But then you have some big cities that are quite large. I'll go through that here as a bit of a regional analysis. But the vast majority of people in Canada do live in or very close to urban centers. So we are very much, an established urban economy. But we do have rural areas as well. We have some really remote areas in northern Canada that you cannot get to by a vehicle. You would have to fly there. It's very interesting. I mean, those are places I wouldn't necessarily target for Portuguese products. They're very, undeveloped markets, but they're still there. So it just speaks to the diversity of Canada, where we've got, places with I live in one, big skyscrapers and, very, very urban downtowns. And then we have farms and country and mountains and places that people will visit as tourists that have beautiful lakes and oceans and mountains and whatever people want, really. It's a very diverse landscape as well. We do skew towards being a bit of a colder climate, so we don't have too many palm trees or rolling ocean beaches that are really, really hot. But we do have, certainly places that, still have beaches, but we have, great skiing. We have, urban activities, from theater to otherwise, great restaurants as well. And that actually is another opportunity for some food brands in terms of we have a wonderful restaurant industry that will shift a little bit with COVID-19 in terms of some restaurants won't make it through this, but there will be some, and some chefs that may have had previous restaurant concepts will launch again. And again, that I think is a very, very exciting opportunity. I'm getting a bit offside, but that I think is actually an important point to make as well in terms of having Portuguese products, and this is more in the food space, I guess, maybe cutlery as well. But the restaurant industry, I think, could be a target. It's not my area of expertise quite so much, but I am getting there in terms of learning, I guess. So we'll do a quick little overview here. British Columbia, this is a beautiful city called Vancouver, about 2.7 million people in the region. The population is very, very highly skewed towards an Asian population or Chinese. So it's just because it's the closest major city in Canada to Asia, we've had much immigration. So what's interesting about Vancouver is it does have quite a few wealthy people, or at least it did, certainly in terms of tourism. We did see a little bit of a downfall in terms of retail and the economy in Vancouver and the area, partly just because it was harder to get money out of China. The Vancouver market certainly had a lot of very high spending people, specifically and primarily, I guess you'd say, who were Chinese, who were buying luxury goods. So there are some very, very fine exclusive stores. It's like, the Beverly Hills or Avenida Liberdade, say the fancy shopping street in Lisbon with Prada and Louis Vuitton, those types of stores. It's got that street. Every Canadian city kind of has that type of shopping to a degree, but Vancouver has a lot of it. It's really, really good. So, but British Columbia will experience its challenges in the short term. The rest of the province, I'll just go to my notes here, is a little bit more dispersed. British Columbia does rely quite a bit on tourism. So again, this is a bit of a challenge in the short term, I think, for British Columbia. Say if there's a store that sells giftware, they may not see quite as high of sales just in the short term. They're not getting quite as many tourists. But again, I think that's going to change. The capital city is Victoria, a beautiful old-looking city on the water. There's a lot of water and mountains in British Columbia. There's other smaller communities in the province as well. They're less, I say, sophisticated than the Vancouver market. There's really just a polarization in the province with population, and then it sort of moves out into areas with tourism and whatnot. Lots of mountains, things like skiing and lakes. Houseboating I've done as well. So British Columbia is a very, very beautiful province. It's also the furthest away from Portugal if you're taking a plane. So unless you're coming from the other side of the world, which is a really long flight. I'll talk about the prairie provinces. This skyline is the city of Calgary, which is actually also close to the mountains, but on the other side of the Rocky Mountains from British Columbia. We'll talk about Alberta. Firstly, Alberta is a province that's economy is very highly reliant on the oil industry. It would be the equivalent of, say, Texas or Saudi Arabia, maybe. The economy has struggled as oil prices has gone down, but nevertheless, it's still a province that has a lot of money. It's also very, very entrepreneurial. Many people there have started their own businesses if they've been laid off or just in general. It's always been, it's a fairly young province. It's a bit over 100 years old, which here is very young still. And it has a very, diverse and vibrant population that's looking at doing things. And I think there's going to be room in the next decade for a lot of growth in Alberta. SK, that stands for Saskatchewan. I probably should have spelled these out, but I can always answer any questions later. A much less populous province has 2 cities that are each about 300,000 people. Not that big, but very much a rural farming community, but lots of opportunities in grocery as one example. Manitoba is another province again. It has a large city called Winnipeg, which is a relatively sophisticated large city of over 600,000 people. Within the city, I think closer to 800,000 in the region, including the areas around it. But again, a province which is very dispersed in terms of population. Lots of agriculture in all 3 of those provinces as well. So, wheat and barley and canola and whatever else they grow there. I'm not a farming expert, but cattle and whatnot. So certainly there was a lot of farming there. As well, what's interesting about the retail in the provinces is it very much skews towards a lot of the bigger type of retailers. So the large grocers, for example, like Loblaws, I mean, that is consistent around the country, as those in Canada know. But in the provinces, many people will have cars and they will drive to these large stores. So they'll go to a Costco, they'll go to a Loblaw type of grocery store. In terms of food, there may be a bit of a less of a sophistication in terms of tastes, but that's going to change, I think, as well. So I think that there are actually a lot of opportunities in the prairies over the next decade for companies from around the world. So I think that's going to be quite exciting. We're going to jump into the big province. Ontario is the largest, I can say most populous province in the country. This is the skyline of the city of Toronto. I mentioned that earlier. Said to be the most multicultural city in the world. If you go out onto the streets, I think we're about to have a storm, but if you're on the streets, look outside, it looks like it's going to rain. Very, very diverse. I love it. I love being in a place where everyone looks different and speaks different languages. I think it's actually very, very exciting, and I welcome it. It may have worked better here than almost anywhere in the world, which is very, very exciting. I think Toronto is a very special city. It's also the business capital of Canada. It's got the highest retail sales in Canada for the most part, well, in overall numbers. The diversity of retail is very, very extensive. We've got street front retail with small stores. We've got the big department stores. We have the suburban retail with different stores. We've got shopping centers, outlet malls, almost anything that you can think of. Very, very diverse. In Ontario, outside of Toronto, it sprawls quite a bit in terms of there are many other communities that almost seem to be part of Toronto, from Hamilton over to Niagara Falls, Guelph, Kitchener. It's a huge population node. They call it the Greater Golden Horseshoe. They call it that because there's a lake that swoops around and looks a bit like a horseshoe. There's about 9 million people in that one region. So 918, that's almost a quarter of all of Canada. I just had to do the math there in terms of population. So that's huge. I mean, this is a very significant region to Canada's economy overall. Toronto is the banking center of Canada. I mean, again, with COVID, things might change a bit, but probably not. Also, Ontario is the only province in Canada to house all 3 levels of government. And what I mean by that is the city of Ottawa in Ontario is home to the federal government. We've got, in the case of Toronto, the provincial government is headquartered in Toronto as the capital city, and then there's municipal government as well. So it's very much a decision-making center for Canada. And then Ottawa, again, as being a city, it's over 1 million people. Lots of government jobs. It's also quite affluent. I think the average household income is over $100,000 a year in Canadian dollars, or about maybe 70,000 euros. So it is quite affluent for a Canadian city. It's a little bit more conservative in its tastes, but I think that will change as things progress as well. And then there's parts of Ontario that are very rural. There are parts that cater to tourism. It's quite diverse as well, kind of like British Columbia, but fewer mountains and a bit more of a diverse population, I would say. We'll get into the market of Quebec here quickly. Quebec is a very unique province in Canada. The French language is spoken quite widely, I would say. The government is trying to continue to do that. So one thing to keep in mind generally for anyone that is bringing products into Canada or doing business in Canada is the French language. Canada is officially a bilingual country. However, in reality, many people outside of Quebec don't speak French. I used to speak French fluidly until I was about 13 years old because they teach us, and I'm 43, so it's been 30 years. I can't speak much French anymore because I lived in parts of Canada where French wasn't really used, and if you don't use it, you eventually can lose it, apparently, as I've learned firsthand. So, but nevertheless, we do have certain laws in Canada. Say, for example, okay, well, these are allergy pills that I bought. The box is empty now, but you have to have it in French and English. As an example, I've got my vitamin D that I'm supposed to take. One side is English and French. So we do have certain laws here in terms of having, again, both official languages being needed for certain products. In the province of Quebec, they've got certainly unique laws. I'll just touch on it, but I won't go too far into it, where the French language may have to be spoken first. If you're a retailer, I think there are fewer of those in this call, but say if you had a store, you would have to have prominent French language signage. So if you go to, say, Montreal, the Starbucks there might be called Starbucks Cafe. Again, having to have that French side to it as well. It's created some complexities to the Quebec market. It's not seen as being quite open. The government had said that, for those that are working in government wearing a religious headscarf, they weren't allowed to wear it at work. There's a bit of a challenge in Quebec, but the opportunities there are, the city of Montreal is very, very large. It's over 4.5 million people. It's growing very fast. It's having a technology boom, or at least it was before COVID-19 and probably still will. There are many wealthy people in the Montreal region as well, which is very encouraging. They are looking often for new products. Despite the French language situation, Montreal is also a very, very multicultural city. It's quite vibrant, and people are known to be fun. And with that fun, I think, comes exploration of new goods. So that, I think, is very, very encouraging. Outside of the Montreal region, we've got Quebec City, which, again, a very old city, some beautiful architecture there. It's large. It's not quite as wealthy. It's the capital city of Quebec. But what we're seeing, again, in the Quebec region generally is you've got that diversity of retail similar to Toronto and I guess other parts of Canada. You've got smaller retailers. You've got large retailers. We still have the suburban big box stores in Quebec, but we have many wonderful neighborhoods with retailers in the city as well. Tourism has still been very, very important to Quebec, which will be a challenge in the short term with the borders closed and people not traveling as much. But again, retail around tourism is strong. Food, I mean, there's a real diversity of food that is there. People in Quebec drink a lot of wine per capita. I have to sit up here compared to the rest of the country. So there's some potential opportunities there as well. We could talk about liquor retail after, or if anyone has any questions, because Canada has some restrictions to how things are done in terms of, in some provinces, some governments will, be selling the alcohol. In some cases, there are, private retailers that can sell it. It depends. It's something that might take a little bit of research, depending where you want to be, because it differs from province by province. So each province, we are one country, but each province has its own set of rules in certain areas, just depending where that stands. So, but back to Quebec again, it's a wonderful place that has very much a diversity of retail, but very much the French language is significant there. I'm going to move, and what I've done in terms of this little presentation, I'm almost done, for the geography is I went from west to east. So now I'm going to go into the East Coast Maritimes, which geographically would be the closest to Portugal in Canada when you're flying over from Europe. This is a photo of St. John's, Newfoundland, a beautiful little city on an island. There's no active cases of COVID-19 there, apparently, so great place to be right now. Same thing with Prince Edward Island. So I'll quickly go over these. These are small provinces geographically. They in Quebec and I guess Ontario to a degree, they're the oldest provinces in the country. Very old buildings, as you can see here in the photo. In some cases, some of these communities actually look like parts of Europe. we actually have a French colony here in Canada called, was it Saint Pierre and Miquelon? It's, yeah, it's actually, France actually owns some islands off of Newfoundland. I think that's really fascinating. I'd like to visit. I think that would be kind of fun. It's like I'm going to France and I'm just taking a boat for a few minutes. But so there are, 4 provinces in the Maritimes. We've got Nova Scotia, a bit over 1 million people. Not quite as affluent as some other parts of Canada, but still has Halifax as a major city. Lots of different types of retail, very much skewing towards the shopping center and big box type of retailers, but many, many independent retailers, say within the city of Halifax as well. So there are opportunities in the Maritime. They're not going to be as big opportunities for a huge amount of distribution, but the small retailers that are there are very much valued by the locals. So we do see a lot of locals really, really, really looking to their local retailers to shop in. Family retailers are very much valued, and there's a real community spirit in the Maritimes, I would say, through all provinces as I look here. So that does create a unique set of retailers that you don't get quite as much per capita or per person in other parts of Canada. You get a lot of independence. So New Brunswick, which is the NB, is another province here. New Brunswick is officially bilingual as a province. I believe it's the only one that is. There's lots of French and English spoken there. Not an affluent place, but not poor. It's fairly mid-market. NL stands for Newfoundland, which is what this photo is. That consists of a province that's on an island, as well as a separate section, Labrador. I think it's not a territory, but on the mainland with Quebec. Again, these are smaller areas, a bit remote. Prince Edward Island is a small little island. Maybe people have heard of Anne of Green Gables. I think that's the most well-known thing for Prince Edward Island. There was a book and a movie. It's a very small island, beautiful. Many people, as tourists, go there as well. So the Maritime provinces do offer opportunities, certainly with the small independent retailers. But if, say, a company that was doing wholesale or manufacturing was looking for large retailers and companies to get involved with, quite often they're going to look to the markets in Toronto and Montreal for the most part. Montreal has a history of the garment industry, clothing and fashion. Toronto also does as well as being the business capital with many corporate headquarters. So again, the biggest cities in Canada and British Columbia to a degree as well with Vancouver, but the big cities are still the business centers that have a lot of corporate headquarters. But certainly the reason I wanted to put a bit of a national scope to this presentation was because places like the Maritimes will have some smaller opportunities, but they still could be fruitful for businesses, and not everyone wants to be in a big, huge retailer, so there are some opportunities there as well. So we could get into some questions. I'll put my final slide up here that was just the website and email, but we can get into that if you want.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Craig. It was very deep and very profound. Well, we have a lot of questions. We have a challenge ahead of us. What I'm going to ask you, please, is if you could answer as fast as you can, as short as you can, please. Okay. This is quite a challenge. Well, first of all, how mature are retailers when it comes to dynamic vehicle routing from warehouse to store? Do they use any technology, or do they still plan routes manually? This is quite a question.
That's a good question. We're actually seeing a disruption in that industry right now. We're seeing far more sophisticated delivery models being implemented. But in some respects, we were a little bit behind, say, the United States in terms of our delivery and logistics. But we are seeing innovations right now. I mean, there's a company right now that's almost like an Uber, where if you're driving from one place to another, you can pick up a package and be paid for it. Overall, in terms of the warehouse to store, COVID-19, interestingly enough, has actually resulted in far more innovation and thoughtfulness to this. So this is a huge time. I mean, in terms of, say, real estate, industrial real estate is going to be probably get the highest return, because there's a lot of product that is being delivered to stores or to consumers at home, or curbside pickup, which is basically driving up, picking up your purchase and leaving. So we are seeing certainly more of a sophistication there, and this is in real time as we are seeing this progressing more now.
Yeah, we'll stick to technology for now. How Canadian companies see technology products and services coming from Portugal? Are they open to different solutions from smaller countries, or do they buy more from the USA? They prefer products made USA.
Good question. If business is done in English, I mean, that could be a little bit of a challenge, but it may not be that, the world is becoming smaller. I think any solution that is seen as being scalable in terms of being able to be rolled out, I don't think that Canada would, or companies in Canada would necessarily discriminate. I think that American companies are always just going to have that opportunity because, English-speaking American, we, are quite similar to the United States, where we have many differences, but there are similarities. But I think that, given the way that the world is, we work with companies literally from around the world with different technologies, say India, China, or otherwise. I don't see why Portugal would be looked at any differently, but certainly it would obviously be having that compelling product and being able to roll it out and having it being really, really good. So I would say if something was really great coming out of the country, that was useful. I don't think that there would be any real challenges to that.
Well, linked to this question, does LinkedIn work well for a first contact with C-level contacts? Do you have any information on that?
Yes, yes and no. If they I guess you can get LinkedIn Premium and not have to connect with them specifically. It really depends. Yeah, I mean, you are going to get in front of some C-suite people like that, but some may be a little bit hesitant. It's a tough question because it really depends on the person. I know some CEOs that absolutely will speak to you, and I know this firsthand. I've reached out to them as a journalist and as a person that's done other business as well. But I would say that would be one tool. I mean, certainly there are other avenues out there to get in front of these individuals, but I would certainly look to LinkedIn as well. I think, or at least looking in the procurement departments. In some cases, some C-suite people may not be even the right contact for certain things, but you never know. I mean, I think it's certainly worth a shot.
Yeah. Okay. Let's change the subject completely. Now we go into food. With the new safe food for Canadians, can we register our manufacturing plant in Portugal like it happens with FDA in the US, or it takes a responsibility for the importer?
That's a good question. I'd almost have to get back to you on that because I'm just wondering if anything has changed recently. Because, we do have certain food certifications here in Canada, but at the same time, much of our food is imported. So if you think about what's in our grocery stores, even just from, your everyday fruit and vegetables to other consumer goods, we have Italy here, the Italian concept. Well, a lot of that stuff is from Italy, not everything, but there really would be, looking to the protocols of certification here in Canada, but definitely we have many, many, many food imports here.
Yeah. Raul, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I got the question right. So the question was if
the new safe food for Canadians. I think it's a new regulation.
Yes.
Can we register our manufacturing plant in Portugal?
No, I don't think so. Well, it has to be a registered and regulated manufacturer. It depends on the type of product. For instance, if we're talking about meat products, those plants have to be approved by our food authority and registered through the CFIA. But besides that, for instance, when it comes to fish, some companies, fish importers have to be registered on this side as well. But it depends on the kind of product that is at stake. And legislation here it's not equal to the one in the States by the FDA. So, but I can go into more detail as long as they please send me an email with the questions, and I'll provide information from the CFIA and the health department here in Canada that oversee those issues.
Okay, perfect. Food supplements. Another question: Are there opportunities for food supplements in Canada? What do you think, Craig?
Food supplements?
Supplements, yeah.
When we say supplements, there's two definitions to that. Are we talking about additives, or are we talking about like a vitamin, like a supplement? Is this a supplement? Do we mean something like that, or do we mean, I should probably just get a clarification.
I think it's that.
Yeah. Again, depending on government approvals, this isn't something I'm not as much of an expert in. So, I always want to defer to experts in some cases. But, certainly if there's a product out there that, would be compelling and would be to a degree price competitive or just be really, really exceptional, as long as it meets certifications under Health Canada protocol, I don't see why that would be a problem. But, obviously there's going to be the
Raul, do you want to add something or maybe answer lately to this question?
Yes, there's indeed a very, very sizable market for those type of supplements in the market. Many of those will require Canadian approval. It depends very much on the type of message they pass along on the labels. If those products are, if they mention certain benefits in terms of health, they do need to be approved by the Canadian authorities. So there are specific regulations in regards to that, but there is a very, very sizable market indeed.
Yeah, but maybe the question could, this company could ask you afterwards the question.
Of course,
you will give them further details. We'll change radically to marketplaces. Could you give us some examples of marketplaces and multi-brand retailers to introduce Portuguese eco-friendly furniture?
Yes, goodness. And there's a real diversity there. I mean, that could be anything from retailers like the Hudson Bay Company, La Maison Simons, some smaller retailers out there that may have home furnishings. And certainly in the larger cities, we do have quite a few of those. I guess we do in the smaller cities as well. I'm just thinking, I had a client, but they only do Canadian-made stuff right now. Diversity is there. Interestingly enough, I mentioned earlier, and I'm not selling this company or anything like that. This just comes to my mind. There's a company called Brica where what they'll do is they work with a lot of small different makers. They're not just Canadian; they can be from around the world, and they introduce products. One of the good things about eco-related products right now is I do think that we are seeing a bit of a consumer shift towards that. People are more interested in being environmentally friendly. Having something that isn't just cheap, they also want to have something with a bit of meaning to it. So something with a good social message as well as an eco message, I think, is quite positive. So that could be anything, again, from the large department store down to the small retailer. Even, I mean, it can be challenging unless you're here in Canada, but to have sort of a local market where you're presenting these things, even a farmer's market, which sounds a bit odd, but they do have, different products there as well. So there is a very wide scope, I would say, of opportunity for those types of products as well. But it's almost easier to say who not to go to. Probably not Walmart, only because, they can be a challenge to get into. It's, they're also a very low price point for the most part in terms of the products that they offer. Costco would be a bit the same. Costco very much has vendors that are set up within the stores. So again, that is a bit of a barrier for some brands. But in terms of other retail models, certainly that are multi-brand, they do exist. And that, again, can be, if it's in the home sphere, it's going to be less the Saks Fifth Avenue and Nordstrom, but it would certainly be along the lines of, the Hudson Bay Company as a store, Simons, which certainly has home furnishings. And again, some of the smaller players as well that are out there. I'm not sure about the Brick and Leon's as furniture stores. We'd have to check what their brand matrix is because they do carry multi-brand, but that would have to be something to be explored a bit more. I wouldn't want to give that answer until looking into that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, concerning e-commerce, again, do you see any local online retailers popping, just like Amazon, but more local? that could be interesting for Portuguese companies?
Oh, it's huge. What we're seeing right now in Canada, COVID-19 has been interesting because a lot of entities have come about that have been trying to get businesses online. So there's a company or an organization here, it's through the city of Toronto, but it's expanding around the country, called Digital Main Street. What they've done essentially is they have worked with, it's government funded, they got $57 million. They're working with small retailers to create really great websites to sell. So what we're seeing, and this is very rapid and this is still progressing, we are seeing retailers now, if they weren't online, they're getting online, or if they were, they're doing it much better. So this is really, really a time when we're seeing a lot of e-commerce sales out there. So I think that within months, this is going to be quite highly developed in Canada, much more so than it was. I think that in some respects, we were a little bit behind with e-commerce in Canada, but we're catching up quickly. It's a very, very rapid progression. And one thing about COVID-19 is it really has accelerated a lot of those trends that we were already seeing happening or should have been happening. Now they are.
Yeah. Okay. Let's change subject again. Distribution. Should the distribution be country level or countrywide or regional level or regional wide? It seems that each region has its own rules of engagement with retail. Is this true or more or less?
It's a good question, and it probably depends on the product. Some brands will roll out in one region to test it out. So, and that could be Ontario or Alberta or Quebec. It really, really depends. If you have a product which it has a mass appeal, a mass retailer might just pick it up and distribute it across the country. What would be an example of that? Well, I'll say LL Bean Fashions. It's an American brand, but they rolled it out to all 89 Hudson's Bay stores. But I think they started in Ontario. So I think it's really case by case. Some brands may test markets, or say if they're going into a retailer that is only local in one region, then that localization strategy works. Or if there's really something that, what would be an example again, fur coats are not going to, be so popular in British Columbia, but in Quebec they might be more so. So I would say there's no one right answer to that. It really, really depends. If you can get a national distribution, that's great. But very often products are tested out in certain local markets, and they test them for a certain diversity. So again, Toronto's a great market, but I see Edmonton being used. Like, what's the Popeye's chicken sandwiches? They're testing them the first place in Canada in Edmonton. So
okay. Do you think the buy less, buy better makes sense in Canada after COVID?
Yes.
Meaning high quality footwear brands, that's the question specific, will pick up faster than medium class quality?
For the most part. Some people have, lost their jobs. Some have lost wealth in the stock market, so there may be a bit less money there. But I do think that we are seeing a renewed consciousness just generally, which is going to see people spending less on the fast fashion, the H&M's, Zara, Forever 21, which isn't here anymore anyways, they're gone. We are definitely seeing a movement towards products that have a little bit more meaning, were they handmade, were they ethically sourced, were the people who made them, paid well and in good conditions, and they weren't in Bangladesh in a factory that could collapse, right? Basically is what I'm saying. So I would say absolutely, this is the time for brands that, are of a better quality to get to consumers. And I think that would include footwear as well. The competition for footwear in Canada is quite strong. We do have quite a few footwear retailers. We have seen some close, but certainly, I think in the case of the Hudson Bay Company, there's going to be a new vendor coming in, possibly from the United Kingdom, who will be running the footwear departments. And so there will be competition. But I think in terms of those types of products that are of a higher quality and are more, say, ethically made, yes, I think that if I was a brand, I would look at Canada for that.
Well, we run out of time, but we have one last question just from a different sector. We are going to furniture. Do you think that in general the furniture sector is attractive to Portuguese companies? What kind of difficulties can we encounter in Canada?
Well, I would say, the furniture sector does have a lot of competition, but we have seen some of these chains actually close. So there is going to be less competition out there. I think it's a matter, one of the big challenges is going to be getting directly to the furniture retailers, say, that you would be trying to target. I think that would be, something to have to overcome a little bit. But again, I mean, we've seen just anecdotally, furniture companies from around the world opening here. King Living out of Australia, for example, has entered Canada. First store in North America, actually, in Vancouver. I don't see any reason why a company from Portugal wouldn't, say, be welcomed into Canada in terms of home furnishings. Like I said earlier, I do think that people are going to be spending a little bit more time at home. They're going to want to have a home environment and space that they love. If there's products from Portugal that are just really great for the home, this is probably one of the best times to actually look at doing that. But it is, again, connecting with the retailers that would be able to sell this, or whatever strategy that the company would have if they're going to do direct to consumer online, which again is something that could be done. An Amazon partnership. There's a few different options out there, but certainly I think that those opportunities will present.
Yeah, and the last question, really, because it's suitable to this period of time. Individual protection. At this time, with the epidemic, what demand Canada have for individual protection products, such as masks, suits, medical devices to combat COVID-19?
Huge, absolutely huge. The reason I say that is I don't think that this virus is going away next week. We've got a lot of Canadians now, or have got face masks and everything. But one thing to keep in mind is
everybody has one.
Yeah, totally. But there's a lot of competition in that space. One thing that we did see I found really interesting is a lot of businesses, even like, for example, men's shirt makers, they didn't have a demand for men's shirts, especially if they're custom made. So they actually were taking the fabric and creating masks. I have one here somewhere that's a men's shirt material. It's a mask. So I would say that the demand is definitely there, but I would certainly say that the supply is there as well. So I can't even count how many companies that I've spoken to that are already doing this. So one thing to keep in mind as well is, with Portugal, with having, a higher, what do you call it? Employees are paid more than a place like China. Very often, if people are looking for personal protective equipment and they're looking to get it at a good cost, they may get it in a place where labor costs are less. So again, the opportunity is there, but it's the cost. You're competing against places that are able to do it for cheaper.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So we're ran out of time. Maybe some members of the audience can contact you directly. You have your email here on your presentation. We'll share your presentation with everybody. Raul also is available. I guess I think it's, of course, is available to contact to Portuguese companies that are present in this webinar. Well, thank you very much, Craig. It was really great to have you here. Muito obrigado. I will change to Portuguese now. Muito obrigado, Raul. E vamos ter que fechar. Agradeço a todos a vossa presença.
E eu, naturalmente, fico à disposição de todos para responder às perguntas que possam ter e para desenvolver alguns assuntos. Eu devo só acrescentar que, apesar desta situação, enfim, difícil que o mercado está a atravessar, exatamente porque, as Craig said, now is a moment companies are reshaping and looking for different ways of doing business and innovation in their systems and procedures and all that. So it's a very good time for companies to keep in contact with the market, introduce themselves, to procure the potential partners, show their solutions, the products that may be innovators in some aspect. But now it's a good time to not let the guard down and keep close to the market, because there are indeed opportunities out there. And I think actually, in spite of the, well, of course, pricing concerns, but Canadian companies will also, after all this, troubles are subdued, will look to Europe with renewed attention as well, and especially we cannot forget the CETA came to shape a new environment, and within the European context, we are very, very competitive in many sectors where Canada will remain highly dependent on imports. So what we call those more traditional sectors, well, Canada will still have to basically rely on imports to supply the market, and we have a lot to offer, and industries here in Canada know about the capacity of Portuguese companies. But the opportunity goes beyond that now in this new environment. Everything, as Craig was saying, everything related with technology will for sure see a very significant boost. Connectivity, online services, everything related with virtual working, the environment. Well, Canada is strongly committed with environment policies, and we hear everywhere Canada needs to have a green recovery. So this is an area of opportunity for sure. Renewable energies. So all these are opportunities that Portuguese companies should pursue, and we are here to help them.
Muito bem, muito obrigado mais uma vez. Ficam os conselhos, ficam também os contactos dos nossos oradores e convido-vos a todos a seguirem a AICEP nas redes sociais, através dos vossos gestores de cliente e através do nosso site para seguirem e para acompanharem as nossas próximas iniciativas. Muito obrigado, boa tarde, até à próxima.
Obrigado a todos. Thank you very much, Craig.
Thank you so much, everyone.